In this video, we're walking through the basics of building an app on Bubble. We'll talk about how to get started, what your most important tools are in the interface, and how to best approach logic and design of your first app. Consider this your Bubble crash course because you don't want to miss out on the critical features and concepts you'll need right from the start. Using a no-code development approach with your app comes with many advantages. First, it can be significantly cheaper to build your app yourself compared to hiring outside development teams or agencies. Second, you are in complete control. You don't have to worry about miscommunicating your vision with other developers. This way, you can ensure you are building exactly what you want. And third, speed. Because you're literally not having to write any traditional code or have to learn a programming language first, your development can go by so much faster. And this includes the build itself, any testing rounds, and iterations on the app long term. Bubble.io is a no-code web application builder. This is a full-stack solution that supports highly interactive, data-driven applications of all sizes, anything from small personal projects to businesses, and businesses of all sizes as well. Small businesses, enterprise, SaaS solutions for organizations. We've really seen it all. And this is all done through visual programming. So you can drag and drop your designs together, you can drag and drop your logic together without writing a single line of code. And because it's full stack, everything is all under one roof. So your designs, your databases, and all of the workflows that connect everything together and bring it to life. Not only that, but there's a whole suite of features and capabilities to really complete your development needs. So there's collaboration tools so that you can work with other people, integration options so that you can connect your app to the outside world, all sorts of data security customizations that you can put in place that are unique to your app, and more. So let's get to know the Bubble interface. All right, so we've got one of our demo applications open here. We are in the editor, and I'm going to take you through 3 primary screens that you'll be using more often than not for building and designing your app. If you look over here on the left-hand side, the editor is split up into 7 different sections. We're going to focus on the first 3 here: design, workflow, and data. The other sections are, of course, important. Those have a little bit more to do with just general settings. So we'll start with the data tab, and this is further broken down into other subtabs. The first one here is data type. So you can think of data types as tables. Every Bubble application comes with a user type so that you can create user records inside of the user table. Anything else that you need for your app, you're going to custom create. Within the data type, you'll also create fields. So these are the different properties you want for every record in that table. So for example, for the user, we'll want to have a date of birth, a name, a photo. These are just examples. And of course, there are some built-in fields that Bubble handles for you, like the creation date of that record. Imagine you're building a financial tracking application. You may want to create a data type for expenses, for sales, for categories to associate your transactions to specific tags, things like that. Notifications, lots of different things that you can do. It's up to you, right? This is actually one of the most important steps that you'll want to take very early on, is to really define your database architecture. You can create all sorts of relationships between these records as well. The next tab here is the privacy tab. This is how you can create privacy rules that are custom to your data structure so that you can grant or restrict access to specific records based on who the user is or what their relationship to that record is. The next tab here is how you can actually see your data that has been created in the app, either by you as the owner of the application or generated by your users. You'll notice that it's all separated by the data types because, again, you can think of the data types as separate tables. So here in this demonstration, I have 7 user records within the user data type, and I can see those values there, some photos, some names, things like that. The next tab is option set. This is a really handy feature and capability within the data structure where you can manage lists of choices that are always going to be available for your users. So these are not created by your users, but for example, with expenses, right? I might want to create a predetermined list of expense categories for my users to choose from in my financial tracking application. So you just set up the option set itself and then the choices within them. Very, very handy capability there. And then the final tab here is your file manager. So any files that are getting uploaded to your application, PDFs, images, documents, these are all going to be managed here. Every app does come with a certain amount of file storage capacity, depending on the plan that you're on, will dictate how much capacity there is. You can also add more capacity as needed. But this is a fantastic capability that comes built in to the Bubble editor as well. You don't have to connect to an external file storage solution. You certainly can if you want, but there's a lot that's already available for you here out of the box. Okay, so the next tab that we're going to look at here is the Design tab. So this is your canvas. This is where you create the front-end interface that your users will see and interact with. The majority of the space taken up here is the canvas itself. This is how you put together your page. On the left-hand side, you have all of the tools, all of the visual elements that you can add to the page. There's a lot of visual elements that come right out of the box with Bubble, but you can also install more through the plugin marketplace. So don't forget that plugin marketplace is there. The visual elements are broken down into different categories depending on the type of element. So you have things that are generally clickable, so or just something to read, so like a text, buttons, icons, things like that. You also have containers, so ways of grouping elements together so that they can move around as a unit. Containers also have very special properties that work with your logic so that you can reference information from your database, and also input forms. This is how your users can really interact with the application, so they can type things in, they can make selections, they can search for things, right? So a combination of these visual elements will help you put your design together. Right now, we're on one of our sign-up demonstrations, and you can see there's a little bit of everything here. We've got a group that kind of organizes this form in one place, right? So that it's separate from the image that we have over to the right. Inside of the form, we have text, we have a button, we have inputs. And this is, these are pieces that are available to you so that you can drag and drop onto the canvas. And when you are working with one of these visual elements, you're going to see this property editor come up. This is a context-sensitive window. So depending on the element that you're selected on, you're going to get different settings available. So within an input, I have the ability to choose, what format of input I can expect. Is this going to be a text? Is it a password? Are they going to type in a number or a currency value of some sort? Compared to a button, my settings change just a little bit. I don't necessarily have all of those same formatting options, or compared to the image, my settings are going to be more about image-related characteristics, the sizing, how it scales, things like that. So this is something that, you're going to find actually all throughout the editor to help you configure all of your designs and logic. Now, there are a couple of other very handy tools within the design canvas, such as your elements tree. So everything that you've placed on your page, you can actually see it in a sort of hierarchy, how things are nested within one another. They can help you show and hide different things so that you can work within the canvas more easily. You have various search tools to help you find things, which, after a while, your app is going to grow to many, many different elements. And so you want to make it really easy for you to move around and keep your development really efficient. And another very big setting here, or capability, is to view your page from the responsive perspective. So actually previewing how this page reacts when you're on different breakpoints, different device widths. So this is our default width. If I take this down to more of like a tablet size, it's a little bit more narrow. If I take it down to more of a mobile, you can see that the design that we have here has collapsed that image away so that we're just looking at the form, since that's more appropriate from a mobile perspective. We've got a little ruler here and stuff so that we can see how everything reacts in one place. So there's a lot of different tools available for you to preview what you're doing, but to highly configure the exact layouts, the precise placements of all these visual elements in your canvas. Bubble has a lot of things that help you to keep things consistent, such as styling tools where you can, create a preset style and then just apply it to everything so you don't have to reconfigure things over and over and over again. And the responsive settings in general are a big help to help you design on a grid, right? Basically placing things in terms of rows and columns. At the end of the day, a very organized page is always going to be in some structure of rows and columns. If you look very closely, you'll see it all over the web. So this is a great way to, quickly put designs together and have full control over how everything looks. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the workflow tab. I have switched over to a different page here where I actually have workflows in place to show you. This is a messaging type of feature here where a user can send a message to other people, whether a one-to-one or a group type of chat. So we have that design there. And in the workflows, we've got a few things to make this interactive. So within the workflow section, what you're doing is you're giving Bubble instructions to do things, either to make adjustments in the database, create a record, edit a record, delete it, or to make something visually happen on the page that the user is looking at, maybe show a little alert message or change the way something is appearing for the user in that moment. So here's an example of a workflow. Workflows are made up of two parts. You have your event and your action. The event is like the trigger. So for example, I have clicked on the send button. This is to send my message. And when that button is clicked, we're going to tell Bubble to run a series of actions. You can have it do one action, you can have it do multiples, and they're going to follow the order that we have here. Now, there's also some other rules and things to understand about, conditional actions where they have to wait on something else that needs to happen, or maybe branching things off into different scenarios based on, who the user is or what the data is that's involved. You have a lot of customization options here. We're going to keep this simple for now. So when the button is clicked, we're going to create a new message record in the database. This message is one of my custom data types for this application. And you can see these are my fields, my custom fields that I've defined within that message data type. This is why it's important to address your database first, because you won't really be able to create the records if the structure doesn't exist yet. So here we have the input being mapped to a specific field that I've created in the message data type. So I'm just telling Bubble what to do and where to find all of the information and bring it all together. Notice that I'm not actually writing any code. This action here to create a new message is one of the many actions available in this list here that's organized by different categories. These are all of the different things that you can do, either visually or adjustments in the database. You just have to search for the thing that you're looking for, and then depending on what it is you're asking Bubble to do, you may have some configuration steps here. So after we create the message, we're going to reset the inputs. I don't have to set anything up here. This is just telling Bubble to clear out the input so it visually gives the user an indication that something happened. And I'm also scrolling to that new message in my list of messages design that I have on the design canvas there. So the event and the actions. You'll notice that there's also a few different types of event options. So some things can happen automatically whenever something becomes true, or the user has to interact with something first, like click a button or make a selection with an input. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg. You can get incredibly customized here because it's up to you to piece these things together. Bubble will offer all of the possible choices, and you just have to choose the right ones in the right combination to bring your app to life. Also remember that the plugin marketplace that Bubble has can also offer different actions and event triggers to add to this area here. It just depends on what capabilities that you're looking for. Sometimes plugins will give you more functionalities that you can work with. On the left-hand side, we have some other organizational tools for workflows. So I can actually put these workflows in folders. You can see that we can color code them. Almost everything that you can customize is also editable in terms of its name. So I can change the way that this event is named so that if I want to find it by a different name later on, here in the search, for example, I can do that. This makes it easy for me to navigate throughout my own editor as efficiently as possible. And that's really important the bigger your app gets, to be able to move quickly and have a full command over your own work. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this useful so far, then I have a free extended training that I want you to head to next. It's over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. And in this free extended training, you're going to learn the necessary individual steps you need to go from idea to app. You'll learn things like scoping your application properly, development methodologies, starting to use no-code tools like the Bubble platform, and you'll also get to see what other non-tech founders are building for their first app. So you can find that over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, and head over there next after this video. All right, so we're going to walk through how to create your first Bubble application. If you haven't already done so, head over to bubble.io and create a new Bubble account. You can do this for free. All applications that you create within your account are automatically going to be placed on the free plan. When you're ready to upgrade to take advantage of more advanced features, then you can place that app on a paid plan. Keep in mind that the plans are per app. So if you're going to have multiple applications within your Bubble account where they're all going to be on paid plans, those are going to be separate paid plans, one for each individual application. Okay, So once you're in your Bubble account, you'll head over to the apps section and then go over to the button create an app in the upper right corner here. We're going to click on that, and that's going to open up a pop-up so that we can name our new app. I'm going to call this CNCA No Code 101. All right, so we'll click on Get Started. And when you first get started, Bubble has a series of intro walkthrough, pop-ups and kind of helpful tutorials to get you acquainted with the interface. I do recommend that you go through those. Those are always very helpful so that you can take a look around and understand what your options are. All right, so now that you have your brand new application created and you're in the editor, you've made your way through all of the getting started tips, make sure that you start with a completely blank page. Resist the urge to use any pre-built components or templates, because I promise you're going to learn so much more when you build everything yourself from scratch. Not to mention, you won't have to spend any time adjusting any pre-built elements so that they're customized to your own application. So starting with a completely blank canvas is going to be the way to go. Okay, now every editor comes with 3 built-in pages. If we go to the page drop-down list in the upper right corner, the upper left corner, we can see what those are. So we have our index, the reset password, and the 404 page. Your index page is your main home page. So if somebody were to navigate to the domain of your application, this is where they land. Some people like to put their marketing material here, just a general landing page. Some other people like to use this as the sign up or login screen to get started and access the application. It's up to you, just depends on what makes sense for your app. The reset password page is where users can reset their password if they've forgotten it. So if they try to log in, they don't know what it is, you can trigger a workflow to send them a link. And when they click on that link, they'll come to this page, and that's where they can reset their password and get access to the app again. The 404 page is your general error page. So if your user tries to access a path on your domain or a page that does not actually exist, they're automatically going to be taken to this screen. You've probably seen this across other websites or applications where it says, oops, we couldn't find what you were looking for. That's what that page is. So those are all built in. Those are handled for you. Just don't forget about the reset and the 404. There are some placeholder designs and text there that you'll want to customize to your own language and your designs. Now, of course, you can create your own custom pages. You will likely be doing this here. So when you click on add a new page, Bubble's going to ask you for the name that you want to give it. This is actually going to show up in the URL, and you can change this after you've created it. You're not stuck with it. There's also a shortcut here to create a copy to save you a little bit of time if you have multiple pages with generally the same design. So we're going to get started with creating a simple sign-up form on our index page. This will give us a bit of exposure to a little bit of everything, visual elements, working with the workflows, and setting up your data structure properly. So let's actually prepare our data structure first to support a new user record. Now I have come in here ahead of time and added fields to my user data type. Every Bubble application comes with a user data type. You're going to see it in your app as well. And I've added 4 fields here for my user. These are custom fields that I created by clicking on this button, create a new field. You can type in your field name there, and then you'll select the format of that field. So is this going to be a text, a number, a date, and so on. So I've created 4 fields, one for date of birth, which is a date, first name, last name are both text, and then profile picture is an image. Notice that there's actually a built-in email field that Bubble provides for us within the user data type. This is a special data type. It's a special field. It has to do with, all of the security credentialing that Bubble will help take care of for you. You'll also notice that you don't see a password field in here. It is there. It's hidden. You will never have access to your user's direct passwords, but it is something that Bubble is managing for you behind the scenes. Okay, so you don't have to create a password field for them. Now, going back over to the design, let's set up kind of the frame of our page. I'm going to double click on the canvas here, and this will pull open my property window. This is broken down into 3 tabs. You'll always see these 3 tabs here for your visual elements: appearance, layout, and conditions. Appearance is going to cover any visual properties like colors, fonts, sizes, things like that. Layout is all about your dimensions, so the widths and heights. There's a lot of different settings here, especially when it comes to responsive design. Right now, my page is at a fixed setting, which you're rarely going to want to do. If you don't know what container layout to choose for your page, go with a column. Not only is it a responsive setting, but it is the most natural. If you think about users engaging with a page, they're typically looking at things in a vertical manner, scrolling up and down. So things are going to be stacked in a vertical column. There are, of course, other use cases where align to parent or row are more appropriate. I encourage you to play around with them so you can see how those behave, but we're going to start with column as it's a great default setting here. Once you're on a responsive setting, you have all sorts of options here for controlling the distribution of elements within that container. So these settings are specific to containers. The page is one giant container. You'll find other ones here as well, groups, pop-ups, things like that. But you can control the minimum widths, the maximum widths, the heights, all sorts of things like that. The conditional tab is where you can change the appearance properties when some condition is true. So for example, if I am logged in or if the current user is logged in, maybe you hide the login button because they don't need to see it. They're already logged in. Or maybe the reverse. If they're logged out, you show a login button so that they can become logged in. That's really just tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of really fine-tuned customizations that you can add to conditions so that you can change how things appear, in that moment, or depending on who the person is or what their relationship is to the page, to the data that they're working with. Okay. All right. So on this page, now that this is set up as a column, we're going to add a header and a footer. So kind of creating a frame, very traditional, so that you have kind of navigation areas for your users, a menu area, things like that. I'm going to start by creating a group. I'm going to click on group here, and then I'm just going to click and drag. It'll resize itself on the page, and then I can fine tune what I want to do with this. First thing I'm going to do here is rename my group to group header. That way I can find it more easily as the app grows. I'm also going to go into the appearance tab here and just change the background style so that I can see it a little bit better, because by default there's no background color, so it looks kind of invisible. So let's change it to one of our color variables here, this bright blue. All right, so there is my header. Now I'm going to create another group. You have tons of shortcuts to help you duplicate, clone things. If you right click, you have all sorts of options here. You have other editing menus, like you might find with all these sorts of editing tools. So I'm going to right click and copy. I can use keyboard shortcuts, but I'm showing you kind of the long way around so you know what's available. And then I'm going to paste here. So now I have two groups. I'm going to rename my second group to group footer like this. And of course, I don't want my footer stacked right below my header. I actually want it at the bottom of the page. So if I go back to the page level of the property editor, head over to the layout, I can change the alignment style. So that can help me control the distribution of the elements within the page. Right now, it is top aligned. So everything just starts at the top of the page and works its way down. But I'm going to choose here to space everything between, or to have space in between. And what that'll do is it'll take the first element in my column, and then the last element, I only have two right now, but it'll spread them out to the top and bottom of the pages. And that way, anything that's in the middle will be evenly distributed. So if I add a button here as an example, it's going to be right in the middle of the page. If I add a text, now both of them are going to be evenly distributed in the page. Again, I can control the sizing further with these individual elements, but you'll see how that alignment style at the page level keeps my header and footer spaced out so that they're always at the top and the bottom. Now, what I will do here is add a group in the middle of my page to serve as kind of my primary container for the form, my sign up form. So I have some resizing to do here because this is certainly not going to be enough space for me to create a sign up form. I'm going to rename this group sign up. And we're also going to give this a border. We'll give it a solid border so we can see it. We'll leave it white. But we'll have solid border. We'll maybe make some rounded borders there. So a little bit of a shadow style so that we have, kind of offsetting it a little bit from the background. Okay, so let's change the sizing of this a touch. I'm going to go into layout of my group sign up, and I'm going to give this a max width. I don't really want it expanding to the full width of the page. So let's give this a max width of, let's say, 600 pixels. And we won't have a minimum width for now. If I wanted to address kind of a mobile responsive down to, smartphones, I might include a minimum width so that it doesn't squish too much. But for now, we'll leave this with no minimum and we'll have a maximum of 600. I also want this in the middle of my page. I don't want it over to the left. So I can change the horizontal alignment to centered. Notice you see all of these different variables that help me control the exact placement of everything. Now, this is also quite short in terms of its height. So here I will give it a minimum height of, let's say, 400 pixels. This can be fine-tuned, but this is a great place to start. So you see, now we have a kind of frame, a little blueprint or a wireframe of where my elements are going to go. This is what I always suggest you do when you're first getting started, is roughly configure the placement of your primary elements so that you know like what the space is, where everything is going to live. All right, so all three of these elements are containers, so I can put stuff inside of them. So for example, I can add a button inside of my group up here to say, let's change the styling of this so that it's not lost inside of the group. It looks like it has the same color. Let's change it to one of these styles here. This is a predetermined style that is managed in the styles area in your editor. You can check that out. That's where you can create all sorts of presets for all visual appearances for your buttons, your text, your groups, your images, even in conditions. Very, very powerful section that can help save you a lot of time and stay super, super consistent in your designs. So I'm applying one of those preset styles, and let's say that this is, log out, something like that, right? And I can center this inside of my group. It looks like my group is still currently a column. I'm going to change this into a row so that the button and anything else I put inside of this group stacks horizontally. So unlike the page, which is a vertical column stacking, the row is going to stack horizontally. So let's add another text here so that you can really see this inside of the group. And looks like the text is set to a black or a very dark blue. So let's change this to white. Okay, I'm going to say my new app. Let's say that this is just the name of my app here. And we're going to give it maybe a bigger sizing so that it's easier to read, make it bold, something like that. Okay, and then in the layout, I'm going to have the boundaries of this text fit to content because I don't really need that much space for that text to take up if it's just going to have these 3 words. I'm also going to get rid of the minimum width. So you see the boundaries of that text is now perfectly around the content that I've typed in. I'll center this as well. And just like with the column distribution, I can change the distribution of these elements inside of the group. So first thing, I'm going to move this text to the front of the row, right? I'm going to have it swap places with the button. Then at the group level, I'm going to space them out differently. I also have this space between option, just like I did with the page. So you see now they're all spread apart. But with this one, I might want a little bit of padding to the left and right. I don't really want them hugging the very edges of that group. So I have a couple of options. I can go with this other this other container alignment to have a little bit of space around. So you see that. So it'll keep things evenly distributed with even spacing on either side and also in between. That might be a little bit too much of like pushing in between there. So if I return this back to the space between option and scroll down to the very bottom, I can add padding to the group. So on the left, I can say, let's add some 20 pixels, just kind of push it over. And then also on the right, 20 pixels there. So I've created some space inside of the group to push everything in by that amount. Okay. So again, you can spend more time with this, like really custom configuring the exact placements. Let's move on to our form. So I'm going to add a few inputs to my form so that I can collect information about my user and get them signed up. Okay, so this input here, notice how it is positioned just in the upper left corner of the group. And that is because the group is a column style and the input is horizontally aligned to the left. So I could move this over to the middle if I wanted to do that. I'm going to add a couple of more inputs here. Let's do 3 inputs total. And one of them is going to be the date for our date of birth. And I'm also going to add a picture uploader so that the user can upload their profile picture. So this picture uploader, I'm also going to move it to the center. Now notice how everything is just touching each other side by side. I might want to give this a little bit more breathing room. So at the group level, another setting that I can work with here is gap spacing. If I check this box, I can add some gaps between the rows created in the column. So let's add maybe 20 pixels of gap spacing there. You see how that spreads that out a little bit more? That's a touch more comfortable. And inside of the group, I'm also going to add some padding as well. Let's do padding all the way around, maybe 20 pixels of padding, top, bottom, left, and right, just so that, again, nothing is really touching the borders of the group to give it a bit cleaner of a styling there. So these inputs also have different settings that we can configure. Let's say that this first input is for the user's email address. Okay, so I'm going to change the format so that Bubble knows this is an email. Technically, an email is just a text, but with credentials, these are special formats. So you'll want to make sure that you tell Bubble that this is where the email is going to go. I'm going to rename my input to say input email. Down in the second input, I'm going to make this my password. Okay, and we're going to call this input password. You see how there are placeholders here. This is an optional thing, but you can put little instruction for your user. You can leave it blank. And also with inputs, you can pre-populate them. That doesn't really apply here for the sign up form, but you can definitely have inputs automatically fill in with some value if you'd like. Whether it's a static value or something dynamic from your database is up to you. And then for this input, I'm going to set this to a date. Actually, you know what? I'm going to replace this with a date picker, which is a different type of input. So I'm going to right click this and I'm going to replace the element type and choose date time picker. It's a different type of input with a few different settings where you can see a calendar to choose a date. It's much more user-friendly in that way. So there is our date picker. And then my image, I think it's all good as is. Now, the last thing I'm going to add is a button to my screen. Okay, and then this is going to say sign up. So an action item, oops, there we go. Sign up is our action item here, and this will trigger our workflow. All right, and I'm going to move this to the middle of the page. Okay, so the user will fill this out. You can preview this page immediately. Once you click on this preview button, you can see exactly what it looks like. It should be, what you see is what you get based on how you've designed everything in the editor. If you see other behavior happening other than what's in your editor, you may have conditions at play. You may have, dynamic values or you may have workflows that might be affecting things. So this is when, you'll want to start learning how to troubleshoot things and understand where do I need to make an adjustment so that the behavior is exactly what I expect. And I also have my debugger turned on. This is a troubleshooting tool. I'm going to turn it off for the moment. We'll talk about the debugger here in a moment, but once this is removed, now I see exactly what I expected, what I designed in the editor. My header at the top, the footer at the bottom, and my sign up group in the middle. Okay. So we're going to go hook up the sign up button so that we can actually create a new user record when the user fills out the form. So from the button, I'm going to click on Add Workflow. And this is automatically going to get me started in my workflow with my first event when the button sign up is clicked. I can also set this up manually. I don't necessarily have to come from the button. I can go to the elements list here and choose an element is clicked. I'll have to choose the element itself, right? You would otherwise see a list here to select. All of these things here are clickable. But that was a nice little shortcut from the property window at the button level. So when this button is clicked, I want to sign up a new user. So that is found under the account settings. We have all sorts of details here, actions that you can use to manage user accounts. And I'm going to run the first one here, sign the user up. You'll notice that Bubble is asking me for some required details. Email password is bare minimum. So the email, I'm going to map this field that Bubble is asking for to the input that I've named email input email so that I know that that right value is going to the right place here. And from the input, I'm going to go to its value. So it's literally what the user typed in. Same thing for the password. You'll notice that I have a lot of different options to choose from here. And as your app starts to expand, you're going to have to navigate to the right pathway to get to the values that you need. We're keeping this very simple, just mapping our input values to the settings here with this action. I could, of course, have another input for them to retype their password. This is an optional setting. I do recommend it, but that way it ensures the user doesn't have a typo with their password. Now, I also have other fields that are custom that I want the user to sign up with. So I'm going to add another field here to define, and this is going to be from my custom fields that I've added in the user data type. So I believe I have one field out there for the first name, so we'll map the first name here to that input. Looks like I didn't actually. Let's go back to the design. I imagined it. Let's add one more input here for their name. I'm going to just copy. I'm using my keyboard shortcuts to copy and paste. Looks like it copied it to the very end there. So I'm going to go over to the layout, bring it back to the top up here by selecting Make First. And we'll change this to a regular text for the user to type in. We'll just do their first name here. And I'm going to rename this input to say first name like this. That way I can identify. Don't want to reference the wrong input. All right, so here the first name, and I can start to search to filter down my list. I want to map to the first name's value. And I also have the date of birth, which is going to map to that date picker. So there's the DOB. We'll navigate to the date picker's value. And same thing for my profile picture, which is an image field. So profile picture here, and this will map to the picture uploader's value, right? So they click on the button, Bubble will create a user record with this action. With all other data types, you're going to use a regular create a new thing action, which is part of your database. Users are a part of your database as well, but they're a special type of data type. So Bubble has very specific actions for creating users and managing them. So once the user is signed up, what I'm going to do is reset the inputs. This is an element action, just a little visual for the user to know, okay, we're signed up. There's all sorts of other things that I can do from here as well. If you think about a sign-up flow, what do you want to happen? You want to send them an email. You want to navigate them to a different page in your application. Maybe you want to show them an alert message that says, okay, you're signed up. All sorts of things. So it's just a matter of sequencing those actions here. So let's preview our page. I'm going to refresh the page here and create my first user in my application. So obviously I haven't put in placeholders. I don't have any labels for this, but ideally I would have text elements that I've also added to this group above each input to help the user identify exactly what these inputs are for. So my first one is my name. So we'll say Gabby. The second one is an email address. We'll say gabby@test.com. And then a password. I'm just going to type in a password here. You see how it conceals it. And then we'll choose a date here for a date of birth, and I'm going to upload an image. All right, so it pulled open my file manager just from my computer, and I could select an image from there. Now I'll click on sign up. You see how all of the inputs cleared out. On the data tab over in app data, and then I can select the user table here. I can confirm if my user was created or not. And there they are. There's the email, date of birth, first name. I didn't set up the last name, so that's left blank. And there's my profile picture. This was the creation date and time. These are built-in timestamps. I can also go over to the file manager, and I should see the photo here as well. So this is contributing to my file storage there. All right. And so that's a very quick kind of crash course into setting up your page layout to get things started. And a quick way to set up a new user. Now, when it comes to customizing your functionalities and interactions in your design, there is so much that you can do. We're going to take a look at a very simple example here with managing our users. So I have gone ahead and created 2 additional users in my database so that I have 3 in total. We've got Joe, Bob, and Gabby here. They all have a profile picture and they all have a first name. Now, I've created a table on a separate page in my application. This is a new page here that I've called Manage Users. And there's a table element here that I can set up to display all of the users in my application in a dynamic way. So all I have to do is tell Bubble, hey, go find all of the users and then populate this table with that information. Now, I am in control of the design of this table, what I want to display. I'm also in control of which users. It doesn't have to be everybody. This table element here is a great container element that helps you create kind of spreadsheet-like designs. And I've set this up to search through my entire user database, unconstrained, no filters, but I could filter this if I want. So for example, I only want to see people who have a profile picture or who were born after a certain year. I could add those constraints here and really fine-tune that data retrieval. Because I have it unconstrained, we're going to see all of my users, all 3 of them in my table here. You'll notice that the way that this looks in the editor is kind of like placeholders. I'm not actually seeing those photos or seeing the exact number of users here. This is how I set up the instructions for Bubble to then evaluate those expressions and then produce the results on the front end preview here that your users will actually see. So notice that with my dynamic row that I have here, in order to show the photo, I have an image element designed inside of this cell, and it's going to dynamically populate with whoever's picture this row belongs to. So current rows, users, profile, picture. Okay, this is an example of a dynamic expression to display something in real time based on what that data is. So, the first person could be Gabby. The first person could be Joe. Maybe if I have my data source filtered, first person might change. Same thing over here, current rows, users, email, current rows, users, first name. So I'm not actually seeing real names. I'm just seeing my instructions to Bubble to evaluate everything. And what it produces is the real data coming from the database. Okay, now I've intentionally displayed the first name inside of an input so that you can see an example of how you can pre-populate inputs with content. So we're seeing, something that I can actually type into and change myself, but it's not actually going to change until I tell Bubble to do it through a workflow. Okay, so I could type all of this in. If I refresh the page, it's just going to revert back to the original name here. So we're going to hook up a workflow so that we can see how we can now modify the record. So with this Save Changes button, I'm going to start by adding a new workflow from this. This is, again, going to create a new event. And what I'm going to do here is run a make a change action. This is under data, and then make a change to a specific thing. In this case, the thing I want to change is the current rows user. I could technically change other things in my database if it made sense to here. I have to go find it. But in this case, I have an immediate kind of shortcut to the parent data source, which is the current rows user. So now I'm modifying that user record. What do I want to change about this user record? I'm going to set up the field and tell Bubble I want to change the first name because that's what my input here is going to be for. So the first name is going to equal the inputs value. So let's go find the input. I can kind of scroll through here. I can also type in, to filter it down, inputs value. If I had other inputs throughout the row for the email, for the profile picture, for other details, I could set up multiple changes all at once in this one action. So by clicking this button, I'm modifying that record and making a change to a specific field here. I can also, show alert messages to the user to let them know that everything was successful. But let's take a quick look at just what that one action does here. And we're going to change one of our users' names in the workflow. Let's change Bob to Robert. And we're going to click on Save Changes. Now, I clicked on the button. The workflow ran. I don't really have a visual indicator that anything happened. So this is why it's really important that you think about your user's experience as well. Bubble's not going to assume to show anything to your users. It is up to you to create those interactions. So I would probably want to show like an alert message or maybe a pop-up or some kind of an indicator to the user. But let's check our database. I'm going to refresh the data down here, and we're going to see that Bob has been changed to Robert. So the change went through. Right? You have other manipulations for the database, other actions available to you. I could delete the whole user if I wanted. I could copy records. Again, I could continue creating other things here. And I'm not restricted to just modifying that rows user. I can go search for other records in my database if maybe I need to have a ripple effect of changes here. Just depends on what you're doing. A few other customizations you want to start to pay closer attention to are things like your conditions, to maybe change the appearances or maybe restrict access to certain details. Let's say that I should only be allowed to change my own first name. I'm currently logged in as Gabby. I recently signed up as Gabby. So I could add a condition here to this button to say, if the current rows user is not the same as the current user, so the current user is the person looking at the page, then I'm going to disable this button. In fact, I'm going to hide the button altogether. I'm going to change the visibility property of this button and turn it off. That visibility property lives in your layout tab here, and by default, everything is visible that you add to the page. So you can turn that off if you want it to start out hidden, and then maybe in a workflow or with a condition like this, you can turn it on. But I've kind of got the reverse. I'm going to have it currently, everything's visible, but with this condition, I will disable it. So let's refresh the page here and we'll see what that did just with the condition. Okay, no workflows or anything happening here. Again, I'm logged in as Gabby, so you see that for Gabby only, that's where that button's available. I don't have the ability to click on that button for the other users. I would probably want to do other conditions on the input for these other users where maybe it's just a text instead of an input. So that's how we can start to apply those conditions there. Conditions can also be added to your workflows. In fact, you're definitely going to take advantage of those as your app starts to grow. You can put conditions at the event level. You can also put conditions on the action level. So you can really fine tune custom flows and pathways that everybody's taking with any sequence of actions that you create here. And then finally, don't forget about your styles. This is the fourth tab here in the editor. And this is where you can configure all of these preset appearance properties so that you can really save yourself time on how things look. So for example, here are all of the styles at the moment that I have for buttons, the flat button, outline button, and I can change those styles by going into kind of what looks like a property editor here, but this is specifically for the style. For the sizing, the colors, there are some conditions that you can create here as well as a part of a style, layout, settings, and all of that. I can add more styles. Within this area, I also have style variables to control kind of my app-wide colors, completely custom to your own application. Now, there are, of course, many other capabilities and features available to you here in the editor. We've really just gone through the very, very basics of putting together a simple feature in a Bubble application. But I'm going to walk through a few other areas that you'll want to be mindful of so that you know what's available as you start to progress in your development. The first thing is to look through all of the different workflow actions so you understand what the possibilities are. These are organized by different categories. So within the account category, you have different user management capabilities here, logging people out, signing them up with social networks, updating their credentials, creating temporary passwords for people. So you can absolutely create systems where users invite other users or create accounts for other people. That's very popular with team environments. A few different navigation flows to move users from screen to screen. Obviously, all sorts of data management operations for your standard CRUD operations, create, reading, updating, and deleting. Some email actions, and again, keep in mind, if you do install plugins, you may see extra actions and workflow events getting added to this area. So just be mindful of that. The plugin details will also list those things out. Under payments, I don't have anything listed right now, but if I had, for example, the Stripe plugin installed, the one that Bubble has published, you're going to see a bunch of actions here, creating a charge, setting up a subscription, setting up invoices, things like that. Analytics is another one that's going to show up with plugins that have been installed. Element actions are more for the visual. So if you need to show or hide something, if you need to reset the contents of a group, for example, there's some animations that you can implement as well. In general, most plugin actions are going to appear here. If there are Bubble created plugins, you'll typically find them within the Bubble categories. But any custom plugins that you add from third-party publishers, if they offer an action, they'll show up in this here. And then you have a couple of more advanced triggers for your workflows within the custom events here, and also within the event triggers up at the top, right? So there's some additional things that you can do to really control the timing around your workflows, the way that data is passed around, and so on. Now, if you head over to the settings area of your editor, there's also several different tabs of configurations that I do recommend you go through, take a look around, see what's available to you. I want to point out a couple of things here. Within the general tab, you have a few other privacy settings that you'll want to pay attention to in terms of defining a password policy, who can access your editor, things like that. Some other general appearance properties that you want to take a look at. Bubble has a built-in connection to Google Places and location services. So if you're working with maps or addresses in any way where you want to calculate distances, you want to extract, the street name from an address, things like that, you'll want to enter in some API keys so that you can take full advantage of those features. Under the domain and email tab, this is where you can connect your application to a custom domain. Bubble doesn't sell domains. You'll need to purchase those from a domain registrar like Bluehost, Squarespace is one now, Google Domains, things like that. And Bubble will give you the instructions so that they're connected properly. Bubble also has a built-in connection to SendGrid, which is an email service provider. So right out of the box, you'll be able to send emails from your application. Now, you can further customize it to ensure that emails are coming from your own custom domain. You can also choose to use an integration if you prefer to go with a different email service provider. It's up to you. Under languages, you have a lot of capability here to create system messages, work with error handling messages if issues show up and you need to present that message to your user. Bubble has a whole bunch of these system messages already created and already translated to all of these different languages that you can see in this dropdown here. This is also an area where you can create custom translations if you're looking to do a multilingual app. Very, very powerful section that gives you a lot of control. If you have SEO requirements that you want to make sure you're meeting, take a look around at this setting here. This is where you can set up your little metadata around your app's title, pictures, description, things like that. And of course, Bubble applications become very powerful when you take advantage of their API capabilities. So the Bubble app itself exposes APIs that other systems can communicate with. So you can actually expose your data through API. If another external system needs to grab information from your database, you can give it that access. By default, it's all turned off. You have to enable these things. You've got to create the privacy rules for them to work properly. But this is a very powerful section, a little more advanced, but know that you have all sorts of extensibility options by communicating with the outside world. If you do plan on working with other people in your Bubble editor, there's some collaboration tools. You can invite them to have access to your app while keeping it private. And a few other additional, custom features around Bubble's versioning. Every once in a while, Bubble will release some bigger upgrades and improvements to the platform so you can upgrade to the latest versions. If you're working with kind of a SaaS system or a very large enterprise system where you need to create multiple sub-applications, you can manage those here as well. So in terms of the design, some other things to be made aware of. Bubble has this concept of a reusable element that can help you repeat your designs across multiple pages. That way you don't have to redesign them and reprogram them over and over again. A very common example of where a reusable element is helpful is your header, right? Typically, you'll want to see something like this on all of your pages. And rather than having to rebuild it every single time, you can create a reusable element out of it. It's kind of like creating a global element that you can copy to multiple pages. If you ever need to make an edit to one of them, you do it once and it'll reflect everywhere you have added an instance of that reusable. Something like this that I've already started here, I can convert to reusable element as well. I can right click on this and I can say, there it is, convert to a reusable element. Once that happens, I can give it a name. I can call it something like main header. And once that's created, Bubble will take me to kind of a special editing area for this element. I might need to reset my color on this here. Looks like it stripped it out. Let's change this back to that blue. And it's kind of like I'm editing a standalone page. You'll see here now my reusable element lives down there. And so on my index page, let's get rid of our original header. Now I can add my main header here, which is my reusable element. I'm going to select this and add that there. And this is now the design of kind of my global element. If I go back over to my manage users page, I can also add an instance of my header. So if I wanted to change the color, for example, or change the wording here or add other elements, I do it within the reusable editing area and it will automatically reflect everywhere I've added that design. It's great for multi-page applications to really save you a lot of time, make sure that things are consistent. Now, the last area that I want to talk about, and this is also for more advanced applications, is that you do have a back-end workflows area. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to have to enable this under the API subtab. I will check this box here. And what this gives me, this is an area that you won't be able to run until you're on a paid plan, but you can configure things. Now I have this section here that I've checked this box, backend workflows in my page dropdown list. So this looks very similar to page workflows, but notice that this design tab is kind of faded out. This is not tied to any specific page. This is where you run server-side workflows. It's an incredibly powerful section of your editor where you can run things on a schedule. You can have things running on a loop. They kind of happen behind the scenes. So let's say that we want to schedule an email to go out to our users a week from now, a year from now, or maybe make a database change every single hour, every month, at the end of every week at a certain time. You have complete control over that kind of scheduling and looping logic if you'd like. This is also an area where you can have external systems trigger things to happen in your app. Let's say that you have a payment gateway integration. You create a new subscription, or someone is going to make an invoice payment. Let's say that their credit card fails. You can have that payment gateway notify you immediately so that you can take an action on it. So you can set up a workflow here to kind of wait for an update from an outside source so that you can update your database. You can send an email, right? So you don't need a user to kind of babysit this area and have to click on a button. These are server-side workflows that can run behind the scenes. Incredibly powerful, especially if you're doing like bulk processing or have anything on a schedule. And finally, when it comes to developing an application, you're absolutely going to run into issues and bugs and things that you need to troubleshoot or investigate, why something isn't happening the way that you intended. It's very normal. We can't possibly design these apps, perfectly right from the beginning. So Bubble has a handful of tools to help you uncover any issues that you may be running into. The first one is your issue checker up here at the top. Anything that is technically not configured properly, so if you're like missing a required setting, they're going to show up here in the issue checker. Bubble will turn this red. It'll show you the number of issues that you have. And this is something to give you kind of like a to-do list so that you can address those and make sure everything is good to go. You actually won't be able to deploy your app to a live environment until all of your issues are resolved. It's a very good thing to have this issue checker here. Another tool that's available to you is your debugger. So you'll see here in the URL that we have this kind of enabled here. And that's that toolbar that's at the very bottom. And this can help us evaluate and inspect all of our different components on the page that we're currently looking at, whether it is the design or the workflows. This is kind of broken down into two parts. The debugger with these buttons here, normal, slow, step by step. This helps me debug a specific workflow. I'm actually going to refresh my page here so that you can see I'm going to go into the step-by-step mode, and I'm going to change my name here. We'll say Gabby Edit. And then I'm going to click on Save Changes. And so now it's going to reveal all the steps that I've created in this workflow to help me really evaluate exactly what is happening, what expressions are being used, what conditions may or may not be passing, because if something happens that I didn't expect with the workflow, I want to uncover why. So workflows are one part of the debugger, but also this inspector on the right side allows me to select any of my elements. I can, again, really break down my expressions. I can see what all the properties are, and that way I can see if something's not lining up with how I designed it in the editor. Remember that your editor is really made up of a bunch of placeholders. They're instructions that you're putting together. So it may be difficult to really preview until you see it in the moment. And if something is not behaving the way that you want, and it's hard to kind of see where that disconnect happened, that's where the debugger can be helpful for you. Another area that is helpful for troubleshooting is your server logs. So here at the very last tab, there's a lot of metrics and analytics available to you for your app. And this second sub-tab here for the server logs helps us see all of the activity that's happening in the application after it's happened. So we have timestamps, we have IDs, we have the email addresses of the people who ran them. This is the log of what I just did on the page here, which was to change the name of that user. So I can see every single piece of what went down to potentially uncover any issues. Sometimes this is the most appropriate route to help you find things. And then the final tool here, which you'll find all throughout the editor, are a lot of different powerful searching tools. So we've seen a few of them already. When you're looking at your design, you can search through all of your elements here. I can, type in to filter those down. Your pages are going to explode in the number of visual elements. So naming them properly and being able to search through them is going to help you move through your editor a lot faster. You can also search within the workflows area as well. And Bubble has a dedicated app search tool, this magnifying glass in the upper right corner, to search your entire application across many different, from many perspectives. So I can search through anything that uses a particular field, for example, any expression, any condition, any reference to a specific field, or I can search by anywhere I'm using a send email action or a make a change action, or anything that uses a particular data source. This is very powerful once your app starts to grow in size, especially if you start to make changes that can have a ripple effect of things. You'll want to check out your entire app and make sure that you've resolved all instances of what that change needs to work with. All right, I hope this was helpful. And if it was, the content you're about to see on the next screen will help you take it even further.